The night was thick with silence, the kind that feels alive. Across the valley of Jezreel, a broken king walked beneath a blackened sky. His name was Saul, and God no longer answered him. He had prayed, he had dreamed, he had sought prophets, priests, even the sacred Urim. But heaven itself had gone still. Now, on the eve of war with the Philistines, Saul's courage had withered. The man who once stood head and shoulders above the people of Israel was bent low beneath fear. The fear of silence. At Gilboa, Saul looked upon the enemy camp, a sea of torches flickering like fireflies across the valley floor. The Philistines had gathered in numberless ranks. Their chariots gleamed like fangs in the dark. Saul's heart trembled within him. He turned to his servants and whispered, "Seek me a woman with a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire." The law of God forbade it. Saul himself had once driven out every medium and necromancer from the land, but now desperation had made him blind. If the living God would not answer, he would consult the dead. So the king disguised himself, casting off his royal robe for a plain cloak. 2 men rode with him through the night, their torches shielded from view. They crossed the hills to Endor, to the house of a woman who trafficked in shadows. Imagine the flicker of her lamp against the walls, the smell of smoke and oil, the uneasy rustle as the king of Israel stood before a witch.
Behold, you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off the mediums from the land. Why do you lay a snare for my life to cause me to die?
As the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. I pray you, bring me up whom I shall name unto thee. The woman studied him, her eyes reflecting the flame, and began her forbidden rite. She muttered words not meant for mortal ears. The air seemed to thicken. A coldness crept through the room, and something unseen stirred in the earth below.
Why have you deceived me? You are Saul.
For she saw, or thought she saw, an old man rising, mantled in a prophet's robe. Saul fell to the ground, his face in the dust. What do you see?
An old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle.
And Saul perceived it was Samuel. Samuel, the prophet who had anointed him. The man who once spoke for God, now summoned from his rest to stand before a disobedient king.
Why hast thou disquieted me, to bring me up?
I am in sore distress, for the Philistines make war against me, and God is departed from me. Therefore I have called thee, and thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do.
Wherefore then dost thou ask of me, seeing the Lord is departed from thee, and is become thine enemy? The Lord hath rent the kingdom of thy hand, and given it to David. Because thou obeyest not the voice of the Lord, tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me.
The word struck like a hammer. Tomorrow, Saul and his sons would die. The king collapsed, his body trembling upon the floor. No strength remained in him. He had eaten nothing all that day and night. The woman, strangely moved by pity, offered him bread. He ate, then rose and walked out into the darkness. They returned to Gilboa under a moonless sky. The wind carried the smell of rain and of death. Somewhere behind him, the witch's fire still burned faintly in the hills of Endor. Saul had reached into the grave for wisdom and found only judgment. He sought light in a place of shadows and learned that those who turn from the voice of God find no comfort among the dead. The next day, the Philistines came, and upon Mount Gilboa the prophecy was fulfilled. The king who would not wait upon the Lord fell upon his own sword. So ended the reign of Saul, the man who once prophesied and then turned to a witch for counsel. Let every soul who hears this remember, when God is silent, it is not the dead we must seek, but repentance and the mercy of the living God.
Hello and welcome to the Chorus in the Chaos podcast. My name is Jack, and I am joined by my good friend and narrator, Blake Labrie. Blake, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Doing all right, man. How are you doing?
Good, good. Well done on the storytelling there.
Well, you know, that's all all that sound effects and voice changes. That's all Jack's handiwork there. So kudos to Jack.
You know, that soothing dulcet tones, as they say, was all you.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
No, but welcome, welcome everyone. So if this is a bit of a change for us, if you've listened to the podcast for some time, you know, we started this series, season 4 on American cults. And we thought, you know, there's such a narrative or a history element to these cults, that would be fun to dedicate an episode to each one of these that told the story. And we thought, what better way to do it than to make it a little more dramatized, a little more storytelling narrative aspects. So we hope you enjoyed that. It was fun for us. Yeah.
And hopefully, if the feedback is good, we'll continue that with each of, because there's just so many wild stories with all of these American cults. And so, you know, that we would just love to tell that way. So we're excited to be here for really our first introduction episode was kind of dipping our toes in the water on what is a cult and kind of laying the premise for this season. And this tonight, we're just going to jump into one of the more wild American cults, and that is going to be the cult of spiritualism or spiritism, depending on what side of the ocean you are on. And one of the things that's particularly interesting about this is that this is one of the cults that we'll be looking at that is very far removed from Orthodox Christianity. And so many of the things that you're going to hear, it's not confusing that it conflicts with your normal run-of-the-mill Christian doctrines. I mean, some of these things are exceedingly strange when it comes to Spiritism, and especially Spiritism as it gets applied to Christianity and things like that. The water becomes more muddy, truly, when we get to things like Seventh-day Adventism, and some of the similarities between Orthodox Christianity and systems like that. Well, we'll still look at the history. We'll still look at the errors within those things. But this one is really, it's soft. It's t-ball compared to the others. There was a recent Gallup poll just in 2025 that asked Americans, polled Americans about their beliefs on paranormal activity. And I was actually really shocked to see some of the results of that Gallup poll. For example, one of the questions or statements was that psychic or spiritual healing, or the power of the human mind to heal the body. 48% of Americans polled said that they believed that that was a thing. 32% said no, and the 19 said, of course, that they weren't sure about it. Ghosts and spirits of the dead people can come back in certain places and in certain situations. 39% of Americans said that they believed that. Telepathy or communication between minds without using the traditional five senses, 29% of individuals said that they believed that that was so. Sometimes we experience that in chat, right? Right.
The mind
Jack,
meld.
Like we the
we're
mind
thinking
meld.
the same thing.
The boys are all sending the same memes to each other, things like that. Yeah. How about 27% of Americans said that they believe that people can hear from and communicate mentally with someone who has died. Clairvoyance, or the power of the mind to know the past and predict the future. 26% of Americans said that they believe that. Astrology and all of that stuff, the stars and planets can affect people's lives. 25% of people said that they believe that. Reincarnation, that is the rebirth of a soul in a new body after death. 24% of people said that they believe that. 24% of Americans said that they believed in witches and witchcraft and things like that. So there is, for as much as we live in a kind of secularist society, I think these are actually very reflective of there is still a lot of people that are confused on this issue of the afterlife and ghosts and witchcraft and all of these different kinds of things. In fact, there was a noted liberal scholar named Dr. Marcus Bach, and he said this. He said, "I have always believed in life after death. The traditional church has believed it too. Spiritism went a step further. It asked us to believe that the spirits were interested and active in human affairs, that they could be reached, seen, and communicated with. For those who believe, spiritualism leads to God." Now, what we just heard in our narrative, of course, from our Bible, in 1 Samuel 28, God, breaks in and interrupts a seance. But the appeal of Spiritism is an interesting one, because life after death is offered in the realm of spiritualism, in the system. It's offered without the commitment. There's no commitment to any one system. There's no commitment to really any one God or anything like that. And so when you talk to people today that say things like, "Well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual," this is kind of the underpinnings of spiritualism, that it was something that promised hope for life after death that didn't involve any structured system whatsoever. Now, the historical context here is everything, because what we see with many of these American cults is they're growing up in this fertile ground that is the Second Great Awakening. And the Second Great Awakening, we mentioned in the first episode, is characterized by personal divine revelation. Everybody's getting a personal word from God. And when everybody's getting a personal word from God, how do you determine who is telling the truth and who isn't? And by what standard are we to believe those things? And on top of that, not only are people receiving words from God, but everyone is claiming that they are regaining something that has been lost, that these things were already, there a long time. This isn't a new thing. This was here a long time ago. And now God in his mercy is revealing these things afresh. The Second Great Awakening, because it begins somewhere between, around 1790 and it ends around 1840. And there is just this religious storm going on. And congregants are being blown left or right. I mean, there's people that are following itinerant preachers, going to camp meetings, doing all of these different things. And there is a religious fervor that is not grounded in the truths of Scripture, but becomes grounded on show and experience and who has a new word and who speaks really well and all of those things. I mean, there's some dangers in that that we could learn from today, for sure. But then this is also developing. So it's developing right at the end of the Second Great Awakening, where people are just tired. I mean, they're just tired of these spiritual things. And then it's happening right before the Civil War. So we're sandwiched kind of in this crucial time period. And in this crucial time period, the country is extremely, extremely divided. It's divided religiously. It's divided politically. There's racial divides. I mean, you have roughly, 3 million African slaves in slavery in the United States at this time. There's all these questions about women's rights, and this is starting to become a big thing as well. And so there's these major political fires burning all over the place. And the overwhelming feeling is everything's breaking down. Like the system is not getting better. Things are just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And at the end of the Second Great Awakening, I mean, this is something that religion is supposed to heal. We're supposed to be able to, the whole hope behind the Second Great Awakening was that we can our country can heal if we turn back to God. But things get worse and worse and worse. In fact, at this time, it's estimated that 2/3 of Americans are in a church, which is crazy. I mean, that's crazy numbers. 2/3 of Americans are in a church, and these revivals are sweeping over and over, and people are being blown all over the place. And then this strange event happens. And this strange event happens in a small home in Hydesville, New York, and it involves 3 young sisters, the Fox Sisters. The year was 1848. In a small farmhouse outside Hydesville, New York, the world of the living and the dead was said to have touched. It began as most deceptions do, with a noise. A sound so simple that few would have noticed had it not come again. The Fox family called it the rapping. March winds rattled the boards of the little home, a 2-story cottage resting among leafless trees and muddy fields. John and Margaret Fox were simple people, farmers, honest and plain. With them lived their 2 youngest daughters, Margaret, age 15, and Kate, age 11. The older children were grown and gone. The nights were quiet. Until they weren't. At first, they blamed the noises on rats in the walls, but the sounds grew deliberate, rhythmic, intelligent. When the girls clapped their hands, the sounds clapped back. When they snapped their fingers, the unseen knocker answered. Kate Fox, wide-eyed in the dark, whispered,
Mr. Splitfoot, do as I do.
and the ghostly raps replied in perfect mimicry. Word spread quickly through Hydesville. Within days, neighbors came to witness the mystery for themselves. Men brought lanterns and solemn faces. Women clutched shawls and crosses. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts. The Fox family gathered in the small bedroom where the raps were strongest. Candles flickered. The walls seemed to breathe. A man named Dulesser, a local blacksmith, called out into the shadows, "Are you a spirit? Make 2 raps for yes and 1 for no." Gasps filled the room. Then came the questions. A name, an age, a story. Through yes and no, the spirit spelled out its tale. A peddler, murdered in the house years before, his body buried beneath the cellar floor. It was enough to chill every soul there and to birth a movement. In the following days, curious townsmen dug beneath the Fox home. They found hair, a few bone fragments, but it was enough for a rumor to be hardened into belief. Hydesville became a destination. Visitors arrived from Rochester, then from New York City itself. The story was printed in the newspapers. Communication with the dead, the Fox family phenomenon. Within weeks, the sisters were invited to demonstrate their gift before crowds. The raps followed them, or so it seemed, wherever they went. In candlelit parlors, the sisters sat before audiences in perfect stillness, hands visible, feet still, as unseen forces struck out answers from the void. "Spirit," they would ask, "how many among us will die this year? Spirit, what is the name of the visitor in the back row?" The responses were instant, sharp, undeniable. Reporters, clergymen, and skeptics came to expose them, yet each left uneasy, unsettled, unable to explain the sounds that echoed beneath their feet. Soon, others began to hear it too. Mediums rose in every city, each claiming to open the same door the Fox girls had found. Tables turned, trumpets floated, and a nation enthralled by progress turned its fascination to the grave. By 1850, what began as the Hydesville rappings had become the foundation of a new faith, spiritualism. Its promise was seductive, proof that the soul survived death and that science could measure eternity. Famous men and women were drawn to it, judges, poets, reformers, even clergymen. Seance circles multiplied, mediums became celebrities. It was not uncommon to hear that a departed child had spoken, or a husband had sent a message from the Summerland. The world was changing, and in the soft light of that change, the Fox sisters stood as prophets of a new revelation. But years passed, and fame turned cold. By 1888, 40 years after the first raps, the sisters had grown poor and bitter. Their faith in the movement they'd started had decayed. At last, one of them, Margaret, stood before a packed audience at the New York Academy of Music and revealed the truth. She confessed that the raps had been produced by the cracking of toe joints, perfected through practice. That the Hydesville spirit had been nothing more than childish mischief gone too far. Yet even as she spoke, many refused to believe her. The crowds who had built a faith upon ghosts could not bear to see them vanish. Margaret later recanted her confession, pressured by friends and followers, and so truth and falsehood were buried together, like the bones said to lie beneath that Hydesville floor. The farmhouse at Hydesville is gone now. Its boards have rotted, its fields reclaimed by time, but the echo of those first raps never truly ceased. Spiritualism swept across America, whispering that death was not the end, that the veil was thin, and that the departed could be summoned with enough faith or enough longing. And so began the great American fascination with seances, mediums, and the world beyond. A fascination that would ensnare even the brilliant and the skeptical. One of them was a man of escape and illusion. A man who would one day sit at seance tables, not as a believer, but as a son mourning his mother. His name was Harry Houdini. The story of the Fox sisters ended in doubt, but the story of the hunt to expose their successors was just beginning.
Never popping my toes again, I can tell you that.
Is it toe popping or is it demons? Who knows? Yeah. This is one of those things, because with Spiritism, it's easy to say, well, it's just all fake. It's all fake. It's all, it's all just mumbo jumbo. It's trickery. It's illusions. It's, toe joints popping and things like that. And some of it in the whole movement is proven to be just that, just trickery, because as the Fox sisters really take off in popularity, others begin trying and attempting to communicate the same way that she does, or that they do. And so there's things like rappings, which people are able to produce. Table tipping becomes a popular form of sitting around a table and asking questions, and the table would levitate or move up off the floor or shake or whatever in response to the questions. Spirits speaking through trance, and so somebody going into a trance and then being able to communicate things from beyond. There was a man named James Mansfield who became very popular because he could hold a letter to his head and say what was in that letter, which I think was an old Carson bit.
I was going to say, it's like a Johnny Carson.
Yeah. Right. And that man's name was Johnny Carson, and he became very popular and had a show. But psychic visions and things become very popular, of course, at this time. Scientists at the time as well, they begin to hypothesize that this isn't spiritual, but maybe it's psychic and maybe it's physical. And so they try to take what is maybe seen as kind of a religious, spiritual connection and then explain it biologically and say, well, maybe there's something more to the human body, the human mind, that can be physically explained by all of these events that really begin sweeping the nation. Now, ultimately, brothers and sisters, we only have a few explanations of this. Either with all of these events, they're either real or they're fake. And if they're real, they are either supernatural in the positive sense, that God is doing these things, or they're demonic. And so really what we're left with as Christians is with these things, that it's really one of two options. It's either that these things were falsely produced and they're fake, or that there is some kind of demonic power at work. And honestly, having studied this rather deeply, I think that it's a mingling of both. I think there were kind of carny charlatans looking to make a dime off of illusions and trickery. And I think that there are other instances, at least from the historical record, as I understand, that it's probably some kind of a demonic thing.
Yeah.
The philosophical underpinnings that kind of hold Spiritism together, because again, there's no code of doctrine. There's no unified church per se at this time. There was a man, though, that was kind of, I would say, one of the founders, along with the Fox Sisters, by the name of Andrew Jackson Davis. Now, Andrew Jackson Davis has this experience with a mesmerist, and he becomes known for the theory of animal magnetism, that every living creature has some kind of fluid of some sort that can make a connection with other living creatures.
Very new agey.
Yeah. He begins practicing hypnosis and things like that. But at the time, mesmerists were really known for two things. They're known for claims to be able to heal people medically and to diagnose people, so that they could go into a trance and they could find out exactly what was wrong with you and then diagnose you with whatever thing you had. And then the other was just parlor tricks. Like, you think about hypnotists that are invited to like corporate events and things like that. And they bring, people up on stage and make them pass out and act weird and do, different things like that. Well, at one particular point, Andrew Jackson Davis, he goes into a trance, and in this trance, he has this vision. And in this vision, there are all of these strings, like noodles, kind of like strings connecting all living things. And in some people that he sees, a mother with her children, for example, these strings are very bright, vibrant, very easy to see. Strangers passing on the street, there would be no string between them. But if someone stopped and talked, there might be a very faint kind of string. So it's like this whole vision of webs linking, people together. This vision made him believe that the world is connected by what he comes to call sympathy. Now, he doesn't mean sympathy in the same way that we mean it. He essentially uses sympathy as a term for an unseen bond. And in his writings, he said that the most vibrant place, the most well seen or well experienced place for sympathy was at a public execution. And he said at a public execution, you could see the most strings, and that everyone there had a string leading to the person that was being executed. And one of the things that he said was that you could see this even without going in a trance, because apparently there's this phenomenon, for example, when someone is hung and their body is swinging. And I've read this in other sources too, that the audience naturally sways with the body, just unknowingly. And he said that was even a physical show of these strings of sympathy that connect people. And so, taking these ideas, his ideas surrounding sympathy develop into this hypothesis that these sympathetic bonds are not just for this life, but that they transcend into the next life. And so he writes this book called Principles of Nature, Her Divine Revelations and a Voice to Mankind, which, of course, now those sympathetic bonds aren't just for here, they're for the other side. And these bonds are so powerful. Some of these bonds are so powerful, and some people are wired in such a way that they can link the living and the translated, as he describes them, those that have died and gone on ahead. So spiritualists become heavily involved in every area of reform. Now, this is like one of the wild phenomenons, because when you look at women's rights, slavery, different things leading up to the Civil War, politics, all of these things, every benevolence kind of things that traditionally would have been handled by the church. Now you have this outside kind of group of people that are really wanting to see things changed because they believe that all of mankind are connected by this sympathy thing. And so abolitionists, again, women's rights movements, all different kinds of reform began taking place at the hands of spiritists. Now, toe popping is only interesting for so long. You can only see so many tables being tipped before people stop coming to see these kinds of things. And so almost when this movement kind of sparks, almost independently, there's all of these other little movements that start that feed into Spiritism. There was a girl named Rachel Baker who was a teenager that they called the sleeping preacher, that she would fall asleep and then she would wake up in the night and she would begin preaching. And she would have all of these divine truths that were way too advanced for a girl of her age, and that she could, that she knew Greek when she was in this trance, but she didn't know it when she was, regular. And supposedly, preachers would come from the area and quiz and test and try to prove her wrong, and they couldn't do it, and they couldn't stump her, and they couldn't pin her down on, that this was all a fake thing. And so this was a big event. There was a woman named Loriana Brackett. Loriana Brackett claimed to be a spiritual traveler, that she could go into a trance and that she could be somewhere else. This is one of the ones that's really weird for me, as far as is this, this seems like it could be faked. Jack and I could set something up where I go into a trance and say, okay, I'm going to walk through the streets of Jack's hometown. On the left is the Burger King, and on next to that is the gas station. And Jack could say, that's right. So very easily set up. But one of the interesting things, with Loriana, is supposedly one of the inquisitors that was kind of attacking her and her position, and that this was false and everything, that she was able to go into a trance and walk through his house, open up drawers and read letters from those drawers, which apparently made that man so uncomfortable that he left. What
that reminds me of?
The meeting.
It was a Joe Rogan episode. Not that I listen to a ton of Joe Rogan, but I remember seeing clips of this. Do you remember the mentalist, the guy that was on Joe Rogan 3-4 months ago?
No.
It was bizarre because through just asking some basic questions, questions you wouldn't think anything about, he was able to guess Joe Rogan's bank PIN number.
Oh, yeah.
You remember seeing that clip?
A clip of that. Yeah, I saw a clip of that. I think now that you said that, I think we talked about it, and some of our mutual friends talked about it, and we were like, that's demonic.
Yeah, it's that's not normal.
Yeah, right. There's no, how do you come up with that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So crazy stuff there. A man named William Mumler. Now, this is kind of a fun area if you want to, consider cults fun. William Mumler popularized spiritual photography. So photography's really taken off, and he takes a picture and develops it, and there's this ghostly figure standing by the person he's got a picture of. And he says that these cameras, they're able to pick up these people with these close sympathetic bonds. And so all of these pictures start circulating in newspapers of men sitting in their mothers behind them, or a child that they had lost beside them. And all of these, this becomes a huge, huge market. Now, here's the thing. You would pay these individuals to take a picture, but that didn't guarantee that there was going to be a person in the photo. And so you could go and you could pay your thing, and maybe your grandmother would be standing behind you, but maybe there would be nothing, but you still had to pay the photographer, of course. So William, he's taking all these pictures. He makes bank off of this until it is revealed beyond the shadow of a doubt that these are faked photos. So you can look up spiritual photography online, and you can see examples, surviving examples of how they did this, and just really some interesting kind of things taking place.
It's like the original deep fake video on.
Yeah, no, truly. Yeah, truly. Around this time, some spiritists get together and they open up a spiritist camp. And this spiritist camp is a place where you go and you get some training. Now, then hopefully can develop kind of your skills and things like that. This camp is some land is purchased, and it's built in Lake Pleasant, Massachusetts. And it was called the Independent Order of Scalpers Club, and everybody would dress up like Indians, like Native Americans. And
sounds totally normal.
Yeah, like totally normal. There's some pictures and stuff from that as well. Now, here's an interesting little fun fact. My former pastor, he was born and raised in Spiritism, and then got saved and came out of it. And so some of the stories that he would tell, because he went to spiritist camps and things like when he was growing up, when he was a kid and a teenager and things like that, just freaky stuff, just weird things. And so maybe some of our listeners have had experience with that kind of thing, and you'd like to share in the comments some of those stories and things maybe that you have experienced. But that camp in Lake Pleasant, Massachusetts is actually still there today. It's no longer called the Independent Order of Scalpers Club. It's called something.
Doesn't sound very PC.
Yeah, something else. Around this time also is the development of the planchette, which is like the precursor to the Ouija board. It was basically a piece of wood with like a pin in it, and you would put your hands on it, and then spirits would guide your hands to write a message, much like a Ouija board would work. And so this takes off. I mean, all of these different practices. I mean, again, keep in mind, a lot of people are thinking this is true. A lot of people are looking for something new and exciting. They are burnt out on religion because of the Second Great Awakening. Also, there's no other, what else are you going to do on a Friday night in the 1800s? Might as well go try to summon the dead and things like that. And so this spreads all over in America. Spiritism becomes popular mostly in the North, though. Mostly in the North, really beginning in kind of that New England and New York area, and then spreading north. There were some small groups of spiritists in Louisiana, but Louisiana already had their own brand of Creole and Haitian voodoo and witchcraft. And so those aren't the same. Spiritualism and voodoo are not the same thing. But in the South, if you were going to be into this kind of thing, chances are you would have already been in it with, again, Creole and Haitian voodoo and things like that. One way that I heard it described as far as the distinction, and I thought this was really helpful, was that in the realm of practical mediation, like our contact with these alleged spirits, what is being accomplished here, that people that are in voodoo and witchcraft proper often are seeking to evoke spirits to change things. Okay, put curses on people, change things, make somebody fall in love with somebody else, yada yada. Whereas with Spiritism, most of the focus is not contacting spirits to change things, but contacting spirits for guidance and assurance. Guidance and peace are kind of the themes of Spiritism.
When about a month ago, I had to go to New Orleans for work. And it's not that it surprised me you hear this stuff, but I was actually a little shocked at how prevalent And I would say there was a mix of spiritualism and voodoo kind of all over the place. Like it was just everywhere. I remember there's this big, I don't remember the name of the church, but there's a big Catholic church in the middle of the French Quarter. And I was walking by it, and basically in the courtyard of the church, I'm sure it wasn't church property. I don't know, maybe it was, but it was like, I mean, right outside the church. There had to have been 20 people doing psychic and tarot card readings where you could just like go from like person to person, like that, like speed dating psychics or tarot card readers. Like, I don't know.
I didn't like that guy's reading. What do you got for me?
Yeah, like give me something better.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was everywhere. It's incredible how that these cultural things, although they happened, 100+ years ago, it's still felt, right? And I think you could, if you've grown up and you mentioned your pastor was involved in it, like history and these events and these things that happen, they don't go away quietly. Like
right.
when these dealings and you get involved in stuff like this and it impacts the culture like it is, it does not fade quietly. Like it goes out kicking and screaming, and there's remnants of it that'll impact generations, right? And I think that's biblical, and maybe we'll get into that in the next episode, but there's lasting impact.
Well, when you think about when the Lord in the 10 Commandments, which is what our last season of the podcast episode was on, we touched on that when we talk about the what's often referred to as kind of the generational curses, that the iniquity is visited on the children and the children's children and things like that. That when you deny the Lord and then you bring up children in that, then they bring up children in that, and you end with you end with like tarot card reading and people visiting psychics and seeking some kind of guidance, but only a very specific kind of guidance that they want, that don't require any real commitment to a system,
Right.
It's funny you mentioned New Orleans. So I think it must have been 2014, maybe in there, 2015. I was in New Orleans. We were visiting. My sister was graduating college, and we visited New Orleans together, all of our family. And we took a tour of St. Louis Cemetery there in New Orleans. And that's where Marie Laveau, the famous voodoo witch, is buried. She has a tomb there. And when we took the tour, when you get to Marie Laveau's tomb, it's covered in these tiny little X's, like 3 series of X's, like 1, 2, 3. And it was from people practicing tomb knocking. So they'd leave an offering, whisper a wish to Marie Laveau, mark the tomb with 3 X's, and leave. It got so bad, like the graffiti of basically the tomb got so bad that that whole cemetery is no longer public, if I understand it correctly. Like you have to have a designated tour guide that makes sure that you're not going to be marking Marie Laveau's tomb with your lipstick or whatever, as you walk around there. Another fun fact, there is a pyramid-shaped tomb in that, because there's only like 2 or 3 spots left in that whole graveyard because it's just so old. It's so old. But one of them is a brand new pyramid-shaped tomb, and it is the future resting place of the actor Nicolas Cage. So
really?
And apparently he paid like $2 million for it or something crazy like that. Yeah. So anyway, if you're planning a trip to New Orleans, you might want to wait until the passing of Nicolas Cage, and then you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You can make your pilgrimage to New Orleans and to Nicolas Cage's grave. But yeah, anyway, lots of crazy stuff. So this all starts taking off. There's money to be made. I mean, the spiritual photography. So there's definitely people that are in it. There's people that are in it for attention. There's people that are in it for peace, or even the desire to give people peace. Because this is one of the things we've joked before, Jack, you and I, about like Miss Cleo. Like if you remember growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, you remember Miss Cleo, with your free tarot card reading and all of that stuff. Ultimately, when that became kind of repopularized and people began kind of holding her feet to the fire and other people's, tarot, a lot of people kind of, people that were in that were saying, well, what does it matter if it gives, as long as it gives the individual hope, or as long as it gives them direction, then what does it matter if it's real or not real or whatever? And so a lot of people in Spiritism were taking that same kind of approach. If I can give some people some peace, who cares if it's a little, if this is the Santa Claus of the situation, it's getting a desired result. A man named Alan Putnam, he writes a book called Witchcraft of New England, Explained by Spiritism. And what he does in that book is he kind of looks back, and this is right at this time that he's writing this. He looks back like the Salem witch trials, which the Salem witch trials at the time, people were saying like, oh, well, even in the 1800s, they'd begin saying like, well, this was probably just, these were just like fanatics, or it was hysteria of some sort. And he kind of started applying principles of spiritualism to the past and saying like, well, no, maybe some of these things were genuine spiritual experiences. And so he sold books off of that. And so there's all kinds of money flowing in this as well. Now, the Civil War hits. Ooh, that was a nice sound effect from hitting my microphone stand.
It's the sound of the Civil War.
Boom. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That was not one of the cool Jack sound effects. That was me. That was like old school sound effects, banging two pieces of wood together and stuff. So the consequences of the Civil War on Spiritism, it does a couple of things. There were people that thought Spiritism and sympathy, like this is going to solve everything. Like religion has failed, but Spiritism's going to work. And everybody's leaning into all of these programs and all of these helps and things like this. But then the Civil War happens anyway. So in one regard, what the Spiritism was supposed to fix, it didn't fix. And so a lot of people lost hope in this movement just because of the Civil War. But then on the other side of the coin, popularity in spiritualism explodes during the Civil War. Because think about even just the ideal death scenario. Jack, give me your ideal death scenario. Like if you could choose your own ending, what does that look like? The final moments of your life.
I mean,
we didn't talk about this beforehand. And so if you say like a flaming Ferrari or something like that, I'm not going to be happy.
No, I'm thinking I'm going down like battling like a group of gorillas or something, like they're like demon gorillas or something. I don't know,
right.
But I want to go down swinging,
It's too late to ask Jack these questions. All right. Here's most people's ideal death. You're really old and you've been pretty healthy this whole time. You're laying on your deathbed and you are lucid and you are surrounded by your loved ones.
Not gorillas.
You're what? Not gorillas, right? Yeah. Oh. Unless your loved ones are gorillas. Yeah, exactly. You're laying in your deathbed. You're surrounded by gorillas, and you're surrounded by your wife, surrounded by your kids, your grandkids, your friends. They all come to see you, and you're able to have these parting words, say your goodbyes, and all of those things. Before the advent of things like hospice care and things like that, where a lot of people now, as they are going out, they're gone days before they're gone. This was a reality for a lot of people leading up to the Civil War. Grandpa is really sick and he's in his deathbed. We recognize it. We're well acquainted with death. Gather the family. Everybody's having their last, talk, and Grandpa's giving his last spiel about the gospel and all these kinds of things. And Grandpa dies. And it's this thing that is kind of normalized. And of course, there's tragedies and sudden deaths and all those things. We understand all of that. But the normal kind of thing is that deathbed scenario. Now, what the Civil War does is that these bedside goodbyes are shattered by mass graves. That there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of men dying and being buried away from home, being buried in unmarked graves. Their families will get no closure. There's no last words. There's no final goodbye. There's no knowing where their grave is so they can go and, get some peace that way. And so people long to recover this last message. This is where Spiritism comes in hard. Because Spiritism tells the grieving widow, the grieving mother, tells the weeping children, you can have contact again. You can have that final message. And that final message is always, I'm at peace. It's so wonderful here. I can't wait to see you. It's everything that you would want to hear. Even people like Mary Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's wife, it is a historical fact that Mary Todd Lincoln held several seances in the White House in an attempt to contact their son, Willie, who died when he was 11. Willie died of typhoid, probably died of typhoid from drinking water from the stream that ran behind the White House. He dies, and she doesn't know how to handle it. And so seances seems like a reasonable solution. This has long-standing effects with a lot of people in big ways, big figures, as well as obviously unknown people as well. Another famous example is Sarah Winchester. So Sarah Winchester, her husband, of course, the Winchester, like think of the Winchester firearm empire and all of those things. Sarah Winchester is overcome with guilt for the deaths that her family's firearms caused, not only at the very, very end of the Civil War, but especially in the American West, as the westward expanse begins taking place. And I mean, man, there's all kinds of people getting shot and dying and all these things, all with Winchester rifles, the gun that won the West. Sarah is so overcome with guilt for what she perceived as her hand in that she goes to a spiritist seance. And what is revealed to her through a medium is that she will die when her home is finally built. Once it's completely built, she will die. And this is why we have the Winchester Mansion in California. If you know anything about the Winchester Mansion, it is a veritable fun house. Staircases that go nowhere, that just lead up into nothing, doors that open into nothing. Sarah, to the day that she died, was having this house built on and built on and built on, built on. Just an unending home renovation. Jack, doesn't that sound good?
Well, it sounds...
Just,
I mean, yeah. Oh,
this is the closest thing to purgatory that is like, yes, you're going to be alive, but you're going to be in a constant state of renovation. No, exactly. So the Winchester House, you can tour it today, and maybe some of our listeners have. Wild place. Spooky place.
They should make like an HGTV series about that. Like, you know, they have those home renovation shows.
Yeah, they probably have. I mean, I'm sure there's been documentaries and stuff about the Winchester Mansion, because that's just all over the place. And so you have, figures like that. Now, what the Civil War does for American Spiritism, it does in Europe. World War I does with spiritualism in Europe. And so Europe is just a step behind America in this movement. And so they've kind of got their own brand of it, and it becomes wildly popular for them. In Boston, Massachusetts in I should say this, because this is going to come in important later. You may have heard of this individual, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
He wrote the Hunger Games, right?
Yeah. Didn't he write The Hobbit? Yeah. No. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Someone just threw their phone, I'm sure.
Right, just smashed it on the... Hey, it can't be any worse than what Netflix is going to do to Lord of the Rings now that they've acquired Warner Brothers. Some hot news for you right off the presses. Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. That's a bonus episode, maybe. But Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, he campaigns for Spiritism and is like one of the big figures in Europe. In fact, his wife is a medium and becomes a medium. And this comes into play later in our story. But what's wild is just like the man who wrote such a logical character as Sherlock Holmes gets so deeply into this world of Spiritism. There's all kinds of investigations and things that take place. Certain figures go throughout the United States. There's actually like funding that's given toward, we really need to pin down these spiritists and prove them wrong, and gather detailed investigations about their lives and all of these kinds of things. Some of these are successful of weeding out, what is fake, and others kind of fail. This quote from the findings of Houdini and Dunginger, and we'll talk about Houdini in just a second, says the fact remains that a great number of self-styled mediums have played upon the credulity and suffering of a public anxious to believe anything which seems to assure continued life to those who have been loved and who have passed the barrier of this life. This leads us to the story of Harry Houdini. Very same Harry Houdini that you're thinking of, the famous magician, the escape artist. One of the greatest biographies I ever read was a biography on Harry Houdini. It was great. But he becomes one of the loudest and most visible opponents of spiritualism in the 20th century. His role in combating Spiritism is to expose fraud. So he is he's a master of magic, Houdini is. And Houdini uses his knowledge of stage magic to show how mediums fake all of this spiritual phenomenon. And so he's able to replicate the wrappings, the levitation, the slate writing, the ectoplasm, which becomes another big kind of gross thing, the floating horns. He's able to reproduce all of these things. And he makes these public campaigns where he goes on lectures. He writes books. He literally writes a book. Notably, he writes a book in 1924 called A Magician Among Spirits to debunk fraudulent mediums. Houdini would go in disguise to seances, kind of incognito, then reveal the tricks behind the seance. So imagine being a medium. Just the worst day at work ever to have Houdini sitting at your table. He also served on a scientific American committee that offered a cash prize for anyone who could prove genuine supernatural powers, and no one ever succeeded. And so there was a challenge given. They could come and try, and Houdini was just there to just crush every single thing. Why did he hate Spiritism so much? Because Houdini was not a Christian in any sense. So why would it have mattered to him so much? He didn't have a lot of religious fervor, meat in the game. He himself was a trickster and a magician and a stage magician and things like that. So why does he dedicate so much time to attacking this movement of Spiritism? And it all comes down to one fateful night of a meeting that he had with his friend, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and his wife, the medium. The year was 1922. In a quiet hotel parlor on the Atlantic coast, a man sat across from a grieving couple. Outside, rain traced long rivers down the glass. Inside, candles flickered like the heartbeat of the room. The man was Harry Houdini, the greatest escape artist the world had ever known. The couple was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and his wife, Lady Jean Doyle. It was to be a seance, a communion with the dead. Houdini and Doyle were an unlikely pair. One, a master of deception, the other, creator of Sherlock Holmes, the most rational detective ever imagined. Yet it was Doyle who believed in the communication of spirits, and Houdini who did not. They had met through fame and fascination. Both men lost loved ones in the Great War. Both longed for assurance that death was not the end. But while Doyle sought comfort in seances, Houdini made it his mission to expose them. He had spent years unmasking mediums who claimed to raise the dead. Women who hid bells beneath their skirts, men who made tables dance with wires and magnets. He had even testified before Congress pleading for laws against what was dubbed spirit fraud. And yet that night, in the candlelight of a New Jersey hotel, Houdini sat quietly because Lady Doyle claimed that she could contact his mother. Lady Doyle prepared the table. She placed a pad of paper before her and took a pencil. Her husband sat beside her, eyes half closed in reverence. Across from them, Houdini folded his hands. The man who could escape any lock, but not the longing for his mother's voice. Lady Doyle prayed in earnest tones. Then she began to write. Her hand trembled, but the pencil moved swiftly. A torrent of cursive words flowing down the page. Sir Arthur whispered, awestruck, "She is in contact, Harry. She's writing what your mother says." Houdini watched, silent. The message was tender and motherly, speaking of love, of peace, of reunion in heaven. And then at the bottom of the page, a large cross. Houdini's mother, however, had been a devout Jew. Houdini said nothing that night. He thanked Lady Doyle for her kindness, embraced Sir Arthur, and left the room with a polite smile. But inside, his heart burned, that fatal combination of anger and grief. He had wanted to believe. He had hoped, if only for a moment, that perhaps this one time something true had reached through the veil. But the cross, the handwriting, the English words, none of it matched the mother he had known. What Doyle called revelation, Houdini saw as a performance, and he resolved that night to expose the trade of the spirits once and for all. In the years that followed, Houdini turned his skill as a magician into a weapon against deception. He infiltrated seances, disguised as a believer, watching mediums conjure phantoms with hidden contraptions. Hands glowing in the dark, footsteps made by accomplices behind curtains. Then, under bright stage lights, he recreated their tricks for the public, showing exactly how each illusion was done. He offered $10,000. Any medium who could perform a genuine supernatural feat under his supervision. But none ever did. He testified before Congress in 1926, urging lawmakers to protect the grieving from spiritual charlatans. He called Spiritism the foulest fraud in human history, preying upon sorrow for profit. Not all applauded. Mediums denounced him. Doyle, once his friend, turned bitter, accusing him of attacking the sacred. The friendship that had once symbolized reason and wonder ended in heartbreak. Later that same year, on Halloween night, Harry Houdini collapsed on stage in Detroit. A ruptured appendix took his life at only 52. Even in death, he could not escape the fascination he fought. His wife, Bess, held a seance every year on the anniversary of his passing, hoping for one true sign from him, a secret word that they had agreed upon before he died, known only to the two of them. She waited for 10 years, but no word ever came. The age of Spiritism waned, but its shadow never vanished. New generations would revive it, from Ouija boards and psychic readings to modern mediums on television. The same promise remains, that we can reach beyond the veil by our own will. But Houdini's life stands as a warning. He had every reason to believe, love, grief, longing, yet he chose truth over the perceived comfort. He knew that what masquerades as light often hides in shadow. Years before his death, Houdini wrote in his diary, "I will not be fooled by shadows. If there is a beyond, it must be approached through honesty, not deception." Those words remain his truest escape. Not from chains, but from lies. And so ends the tale of the great magician and the age of American Spiritism. Born in the ramps of Hydesville, tested in the seance halls of the rich, and finally unmasked by a man who could see through the illusion. For all their noise, the spirits were silent, and only truth remained.